A folded piece of paper, not even a full sheet. A torn corner ripped from something already thrown away, smoothed flat, folded once. 5 words in handwriting that was precise and deliberate. The kind of handwriting that belongs to someone who once had to write clearly under pressure, under fluorescent lights, with cold hands, with everything at stake. It was sitting underneath Akua's patient file at 6:14 in the morning. She almost didn't see it. She had been at that workstation for 4 hours straight. Her eyes were burning. The coffee she had poured at 2 a.m. was cold and untouched. She was a second-year internal medicine resident at St. Joseph's Medical Center in downtown Toronto, and she had been staring at the same lab results. For so long the numbers had stopped meaning anything. The surgery was scheduled for 7:30. She was out of time. She lifted the patient chart to shove it back into the folder, and the folded paper fell out. She almost threw it away. It was just a scrap, a torn corner from a printed form. She could see the faint grid of a discharge checklist on the back of it. She almost crumpled it up and dropped it in the waste bin with the empty coffee cups and the plastic packaging and the other paper that had been piling up at her workstation for 3 days. But she read it. 5 words in black ink, and her hands started shaking. Because those 5 words hadn't been there when she sat down at midnight, and whoever wrote them had read the entire chart, and those 5 words, if she was right about what they meant, were going to save a man's life in the next 47 minutes. They came from the last person anyone would have suspected. Her name was Mansa Adepa. She was 57 years old. She had been cleaning the overnight wards at St. Joseph's for 9 years. She arrived at 10:30 every evening and left before the day shift came on at 6 a.m. In between, she was invisible. She knew that hospital better than most of the physicians who worked there. She knew which elevator on the south wing ran slow on cold nights. She knew that the blood pressure cuff mount in room 412 had a loose bracket that nobody had fixed in 2 years. She knew that the nursing station on 7 North smelled burnt coffee by 3 a.m. because someone always forgot to switch off the pot. She knew everything about this place, and no one knew anything about her. The residents walked past her the way you walk past a piece of furniture you have seen so many times it has stopped registering. Not with cruelty, just with the particular blindness that comes from never having had a reason to look. She was the woman with the mop. The woman in the gray uniform, the woman who emptied the sharps containers and wiped down the IV stands and disappeared before the morning light came through the windows. Dr. Carmichael, the chief of internal medicine, had walked the same corridor as Mansa every single morning for 6 years. He collected his coffee from the break room at 6:05 a.m. Mansa left the ward at 5:50. Their paths had crossed exactly once, when she dropped a bottle of cleaning solution near the nurse's station, and he stepped around it without looking down. He did not know her name. He did not know she existed. The only person in the building who spoke to Mansa was Franklin, the overnight security guard. He sat at the main desk of the East Wing from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. with a thermos of red rose tea and a worn paperback novel. "Evening, Doc," Franklin would say when Mansa came through the doors. It was a joke. Franklin had called her that since her first week because, as he put it, she looked at medical charts left on nursing stations the way his old university professor used to look at exam papers, with calculation behind the eyes. "Evening, Franklin," she would say. "Quiet night?" Always quiet till it isn't. Mansa would smile and take her cart to the elevator and disappear into the wards. And Franklin watched her go every night. And every night he thought the same thing he had been thinking for 9 years. Who was this woman, really? Because cleaners don't stop at nursing stations to study lab printouts left beside the keyboard. Cleaners don't pause outside a patient's room, glance at the diagnosis board, and then stand completely still for a moment, the way someone stands when they are working something out in their head. Cleaners don't correct the date on a fluid balance chart with a pencil mark so light that no one ever noticed who had made it. But Mansa did, every night for 9 years. And nobody ever asked why. There was one ward Mansa cleaned quickly and moved through without stopping, without reading anything, without slowing her pace. The cardiac care unit on the 6th floor. She had a reason for that. a reason she had never explained to anyone in this building. Until the night she heard Akua Frempong crying at the workstation on Ward 5, and something inside her chest broke open that she had been keeping sealed for a very long time. Akua was 29 years old. She had been at St. Joseph's for 14 months, and she was drowning. She was the only black woman in her internal medicine residency cohort. She had done her undergraduate degree at Western, her medical degree at McMaster. Top 10% honor roll both years. She had turned down an offer at a larger hospital uptown because St. Joseph's had a reputation for hands-on training. Real cases, real responsibility, a real shot. They gave her the overnight general medicine ward, 36 patients, night and day. The case that was breaking her now was a man named Mr. Castellano, 67 years old, retired school principal from Scarborough, admitted 4 days ago for preoperative clearance before an elective hip replacement. Surgery was scheduled for 7:30 in the morning. His chart was straightforward: hypertension managed, mild type 2 diabetes managed, slightly elevated cholesterol managed. His ECG on admission was normal, his chest x-ray was clear, his blood work on day 1 and day 2 was unremarkable. Akua had cleared him for surgery. But on day 4, last night, his routine troponin had come back at 0.7. Within normal range, the hospital threshold for concern was anything above 0.10. Technically, it was fine. Except something kept pulling her back to that number. She could not name it. It was not a clinical rationale she could put into words. It was something quieter, a feeling that the number did not fit, that it was out of place somehow. She ordered a repeat troponin at midnight. It came back at 0.07 again, same, still within normal. She had called Dr. Carmichael's registrar at 11 p.m. to flag the result. The registrar told her, politely but clearly, that 0.07 was within range, and that she should not delay a scheduled surgery over a value that had not crossed any threshold. So she pulled up everything, every lab from every day, and she stared at it. And she did not know what she was looking at. The pre-op assessment on Mr. Castellano is incomplete, Frempong. Dr. Carmichael had said that to her in front of 3 other residents 2 days ago. She had brought a minor concern to morning rounds, and he had turned it into a teaching moment, his kind of teaching moment, the kind that teaches you to stay quiet. If you're going to flag something, make sure you know what you're flagging. We can't afford hesitation in this department. She hadn't argued, she never argued. She just nodded and went back to the ward and worked until her vision blurred. Her parents had moved from Kumasi to Brampton when she was 4 years old. Her mother had cleaned offices in North York 5 nights a week for 11 years so that Akua could go to university without debt. Her father had driven a cab until his knees gave out. They had told her her whole life that she was going to be a doctor, not because it was a dream, but because they had done the math and decided it was what was possible if she worked hard enough. And now she was sitting at a hospital workstation at 2 a.m., staring at numbers she could not read, with a man's surgery starting in 5 hours, feeling like she had failed everyone who had ever believed in her. She put her head in her hands. She didn't know anyone was listening, but someone was. The corridor outside Ward 5 was empty. The fluorescent lights were doing what fluorescent lights do at 2 a.m., humming their flat, merciless hum. Mansa stood outside the workstation bay with her mop in one hand and her cleaning cart beside her. She could hear Akua through the frosted glass partition, not loud crying, the quiet kind, the kind that has stopped asking for anything, that has simply accepted the weight. Mansa knew that sound. She closed her eyes. She had a choice, the same choice she made every night: move on, clean the next bay, stay invisible, protect the quiet life she had built from the wreckage of the one that had been taken from her. Or, she looked at the mop in her hand. This was what her life had become. A woman who had once performed cardiac catheterizations at Corlebu Teaching Hospital, who had published in the West African Journal of Medicine, who had trained 12 residents of her own, standing in a hospital corridor in Toronto at 2 a.m., holding a mop outside someone else's workstation. She had been reading the Ward 5 boards every night for 3 weeks without meaning to. You cannot stop a mind like hers from reading a chart the way you cannot stop an ear for music from hearing a wrong note. It happens before the decision to do it. She had seen Mr. Castellano's file 2 nights ago. She had tilted the unlocked monitor slightly. It had been left open, angled toward the corridor, and looked at the troponin values, just the values. Day 1, 002. Day 2, Day 3, first draw 005. Night 4, midnight draw 007. Mansa had looked at those 4 numbers. She had looked at them for less than 10 seconds. And she had known. Not because any single value was abnormal. They were all within range. That was exactly the thing that made this invisible to someone trained to watch for a threshold. But Mansa had not trained at a hospital with instant consultant access and perfect equipment. She had trained in a place where you watched trends, where you learned to read the direction a body was moving, not just the position it was in today. The troponin was rising, slowly, day by day, draw by draw. Mista Stu Chino 5, Spino 7. That was not a stable heart. That was a heart in distress, moving toward a myocardial infarction one quiet increment at a time. If someone put that man under general anesthesia in the morning, his heart, already under metabolic strain, would face the additional demands of surgery, fluid shifts, anesthetic agents, blood pressure fluctuation. He would not survive the table. She had known this for 2 nights, and she had said nothing. Because the last time Mansa Adepa had spoken up about something she saw clearly that others had missed, they had taken everything from her. But standing in that corridor, listening to a young woman cry behind frosted glass, the silence became heavier than the fear. Mansa set down her mop. She looked at the recycling bin beside the workstation entrance. A discharge form was sitting on top, mostly blank, one side clean. She tore a corner, careful, straight edge. She reached for the black pen in her breast pocket, the same pen she had been carrying every single night for 9 years, without anyone thinking to ask why a cleaner needed a pen. She wrote 5 words. Troponin trend, compare all 4 values. She folded the paper once. She walked to Akua's workstation. The young doctor was asleep at her desk, head on her arms, laptop still open to a lab results page. Mansa slid the note beneath the edge of the chart folder where it would fall out when the folder was moved, but not before. She picked up her mop. She left. She did not look back. The security camera on Ward 5 would later confirm it. She entered the workstation bay at 2:51 a.m. and left at 2:52 a.m. 38 seconds. 38 seconds to do what 9 years of silence had not been able to do. On her way out, she passed Franklin at the East Wing desk. "Early call, Doc," Franklin said. There was something different in his voice, a question he had been holding for 9 years and never quite let go of. Mansa paused at the door, something on her face that he had never seen, something settled, something finished. "Good night, Franklin," she said. And she walked out into the Toronto night. Akua Frempong woke up at 6:14 a.m. with her neck aching and her laptop screen still bright. She lifted the patient chart to put it away. The folded corner of paper fell onto the keyboard. She almost threw it out, she almost did, but she read it. 5 words. Troponin trend, compare all 4 values. She looked at the note, she turned it over, a discharge form on the back. Handwriting she had never seen, precise, controlled, the kind of control that belongs to someone who has written a great many important things in their lifetime. She pulled up Mr. Castellano's chart. She put every troponin value on one screen side by side. Day 1, 0.02, Day 3.03, Day 4.07. Her hands started shaking. She was not a cardiologist, but she could see it now. She could see it so clearly that she could not understand how she had been looking at these numbers for 4 days without seeing it. Because no single value had crossed the line, because she had been watching for a number to be wrong, not watching for a direction. The direction was wrong. This heart was climbing, slowly, quietly, politely, within all normal ranges, and climbing toward a crisis. Surgery was in 73 minutes. She grabbed the chart and ran. Dr. Carmichael was in his office with his coffee at 6:20 a.m. He looked up when Akua came through the door without knocking. He looked like he was about to say something about protocol. She put the 4 troponin values on his desk, all 4, in order, nothing else. He looked at them. He put on his glasses. He looked again. He picked up his phone. Get the cardiology fellow on call now and push Mr. Castellano's surgery until further notice. The cardiology fellow ordered an urgent echocardiogram and serial troponins every 2 hours. By 8 a.m., the newest troponin had come back at 0.11, the first value to cross the clinical threshold. By 10 a.m., Mr. Castellano was in the catheterization lab. The interventional cardiologist found a 92% occlusion in his left anterior descending artery. A widowmaker, they called it in the department. One of the most dangerous blockages a heart can carry without announcing itself. If he had gone under general anesthesia that morning, he would not have come back out. Dr. Carmichael stood in the hallway with Akua after the cath lab team had taken over. He was quiet for a moment, then, "Good catch, Frempong." She said, "It wasn't me." And she held up the folded corner of paper. "If this story has its hooks in you, stay with me. Because what the security cameras showed, and what they found when they went looking for the person in the footage, it is the kind of thing that makes an entire room go very still." The ward coordinator, the charge nurse, and Dr. Carmichael stood in the hospital's security office that afternoon. Monitors stacked along one wall, the footage from Ward 5, time-stamped 2 a.m. They watched the hallway. They watched a figure in a gray cleaning uniform enter the workstation bay, move to the desk, set something down, and leave. 38 seconds. "Who is that?" Dr. Carmichael asked. The security supervisor leaned forward. "That's Mansa Adepa. She does the overnight cleaning, east and north wings. Been here 9 years. 9 years. Yes, sir. How does a cleaner know about troponin trends?" The ward coordinator was already on her laptop. She typed the name, she scrolled, she stopped. She turned the laptop toward Dr. Carmichael. He read the screen. He read it a second time. He said nothing. "Bring her in," he said finally, "please, with respect." This is the part of the story that Mansa had carried alone for 9 years, the part she had never told anyone in this building. Not Franklin. Not the ward coordinator who said good morning every day. Not the nurse who had once asked where she was from and seemed genuinely curious. Mansa had graduated at the top of her class from the University of Ghana Medical School in 1993. She had specialized in cardiology, then in interventional cardiology, at a time when fewer than 30 interventional cardiologists practiced in the entire country. By 40, she had performed over 2,000 cardiac catheterizations. She had trained a generation of cardiologists at Korle Bu Teaching Hospital. She had published research on rheumatic heart disease in sub-Saharan Africa that was cited in international clinical guidelines. She had built something extraordinary. And then she had tried to do the right thing. The hospital administrator at Korle Bu was falsifying patient outcome data. The mortality numbers submitted to the Ministry of Health were not the real numbers. The discrepancy involved a research grant, international funding, and it involved deaths being reclassified on paper so that the statistics stayed clean. Mansa found it because she was meticulous. She read everything. She compared figures. She noticed when a direction was wrong even when every individual data point looked acceptable. She reported it. She thought the institution would correct itself. Within 4 months, an anonymous complaint had been filed with the Medical and Dental Council of Ghana. Fabricated malpractice allegations, manufactured patient records. A hearing was convened. Mansa attended with her own documentation, her own files, 30 years of a career that spoke for itself. It did not matter. The license was revoked on a Tuesday morning. Her husband, Arhin, a secondary school history teacher who had loved her for 26 years, held her hand outside the council chambers afterward. He said, "We will figure it out." He always meant what he said. But the stress of what followed, the loss of income, the isolation, the exhaustion of appealing a decision in a system that had already decided, Arhin's blood pressure went uncontrolled for too long. He had a stroke 14 months after the verdict. He survived. But he was not the same afterward. Mansa used the last of their savings to fly to Toronto, where her sister lived in Scarborough. She was 53 years old with 30 years of cardiac medicine in her hands and a piece of paper from Ghana that the Canadian medical system would require her to begin nearly from the start to validate. The relicensing pathway for internationally trained physicians in Canada was real, available, and years long. She did not have years. She had a sister's couch and Arhin's rehabilitation costs coming from Accra every month. She found the cleaning position through her sister's church. She told no one who she had been. She just worked. And every night, alone in the wards, she read. She kept herself sharp the only way she could, the way a musician who no longer has a stage still hears the music in everything. The ward coordinator read all of this from the search results and the professional archive records. She read the journal citations. She read the council decision. She read the appeal that had been denied. She closed her laptop. She saved that man's life, the ward coordinator said quietly, with 5 words and 38 seconds. Dr. Carmichael straightened his jacket. "Bring her in," he said again, not as a member of the cleaning staff, as a colleague. The boardroom on the 4th floor had a view west toward Lake Ontario. The department heads sat around the table the following morning. Dr. Carmichael at the head, Dr. Pelletier, chief of cardiology, to his right, Akua standing near the door. The door opened. Mansa Adepa walked in. She was not wearing her gray cleaning uniform. She had on a dark blazer borrowed from her sister. Simple, clean, old, pressed, the kind of garment that matters not because of itself, but because of what it replaces. She looked different. Not because of the blazer, because of how she stood. The shoulders were straight, the eyes were level. The woman who had moved quietly through these corridors for 9 years, present, invisible, saying nothing, walked into that boardroom the way someone walks into a room they have stood in before, with the unhurried certainty of someone who has done this work for 30 years and knows it. Every person at that table felt the shift, the way a room changes when someone with real authority enters it. Dr. Carmichael cleared his throat. "Dr. Adepa, please sit down." Mansa looked at the chair, a department head's chair, padded leather, the kind of chair she had last sat in 9 years ago. She sat. "It has come to our attention," Dr. Carmichael said, "that you left a note on the Ward 5 workstation 2 nights ago, a note that led to a diagnosis that very likely saved a patient's life." "It did save his life," Mansa said, simply, without drama. "Can you explain what you observed?" Mansa looked around the table. She saw skepticism, she saw discomfort, she saw people trying very hard to keep their faces neutral. She explained the troponin trend, the incremental rise, why each individual value could appear acceptable in isolation, why the direction across 4 time points told a different story. She used clinical language, precise, specific, delivered at the exact pace and pitch of someone who has explained a concept to a room full of trainees many times and knows which words land clearly and which ones lose the room. When she finished, the room was completely still. Dr. Pelletier was the first to speak. He had been leaning forward for 2 minutes. "Where did you train?" "University of Ghana Medical School, Korlebu Teaching Hospital, Cardiology, Interventional Subspecialty." "How many years in practice?" 30 before I lost my license." The room stayed still. Dr. Carmichael slid the folder across the table, the printouts, the journal citations, the patient record archive, the council decision. The department heads read page by page. In silence, the room grew quieter with every page turned. Dr. Pelletier took off his glasses. He set them on the table. He looked like a man who has just understood something he should have understood much earlier and is not certain what to do with that. "You have been cleaning our wards for 9 years." "Yes." "And reading our patient charts." "Yes." He was quiet for a moment. "Why didn't you come forward directly? Any of the times you saw something?" Mansa looked at him. She looked at the faces around the table. She looked at Akua by the door. "Because the last time I spoke clearly about what I saw," she said, "I lost everything I had built. I believed what I had left was worth more than the risk of losing it." She paused. "But there is a young woman in this hospital who reminded me of myself at 29. and I could not watch her carry a weight I could remove in 5 words. Akua pressed one hand flat against the boardroom glass. She had decided she was not going to cry in this room. She cried anyway. Dr. Carmichael stood up. He walked around the table. He stopped in front of Mansa and he extended his hand. "Dr. Adepa," he said, "this hospital has resources and relationships with the MCCQE review pathway, and we would like very much to support you through the Canadian relicensing process. We also have a position in the cardiology research program, a clinical coordinator role, that has been waiting for someone with your background for longer than I care to admit." He held his hand steady. "This is not charity. This is a hospital that has spent 9 years walking past the most experienced cardiologist in the building. We would like to stop doing that, starting now." Mansa looked at his hand. She thought about Arhin, about the chambers in Accra, about the administrator who had smiled from across the hearing room, about the first morning she had put on a gray cleaning uniform and told herself it was temporary, and then the morning she had understood it might not be. She thought about Mr. Castellano alive, 1 floor above them. She shook Dr. Carmichael's hand. "I'll need access to the catheterization lab journals," she said, "and a desk with a proper monitor." Dr. Pelletier smiled. The ward coordinator's shoulders dropped with relief. Akua laughed through her tears. Mansa did not smile yet, but something in her face, something that had been held carefully in place for 9 years, began, slowly, quietly, to come undone. Mr. Castellano went home 11 days later. He stopped at the nurse's station on Ward 5 on his way out. He left a box of Timbits and a handwritten card. It said, "Thank you for seeing what needed to be seen." He did not know who had seen it. He had only been told that it had been caught in time. 3 weeks after that, Akua came to Mansa's office on the 3rd floor, a borrowed room with a borrowed desk, both already immaculate, and set a coffee down beside the relicensing study materials spread across the surface. "Do you drink it?" Akua asked. Mansa looked at the cup, "Sometimes." I realized I didn't know. Akua pulled up a chair. 14 months at this hospital. I never once brought coffee to anyone on the overnight cleaning crew. I just left my empty cups out and assumed someone else would handle it. Mansa wrapped her hands around the mug. "You were a resident," she said. "You were exhausted. You were being managed by someone who told you your instincts were wrong when they were right. That's not an excuse." "No," Mansa agreed, "but it is a reason. And reasons matter, not because they justify how we behaved, but because understanding them is how we decide who to become afterward." Akua was quiet for a moment. "My mother cleaned offices in North York," she said. 5 nights a week for 11 years. I never went with her. Never once asked what it was like. I was always studying." "She was studying too," Mansa said. "In her own way, she was studying what it would take." Akua looked at her hands. "I think I have been walking past people my whole life," she said, "thinking I was moving towards something, not seeing what I was moving past." The room was quiet. Outside the window, Toronto was gray and November and relentless, doing what it always does, carrying on, indifferent to the small rearrangements happening inside the buildings. "Then stop," Mansa said. "It is not complicated, just stop and look." The relicensing process took 21 months. Mansa Adepa passed every component of the Medical Council of Canada qualifying examination on her first attempt. She was 59 years old when she received her license to practice medicine in Ontario. She came back to work at St. Joseph's not with a mop cart but with a white coat. She wore it the way she had worn that borrowed blazer the morning they brought her into the boardroom. Not like something new, but like something returned. She asked for a desk in the shared resident workroom, not a corner office, not a faculty suite. She said she liked being where the residents worked. She said she learned more there. What she meant, and what everyone who worked alongside her came to understand over time, was that she remembered what it felt like to have the answer inside you while the room treated you like you had nothing to contribute. And she had decided that if she was going to spend the years she had left in medicine, she was going to spend them making sure every person still learning knew that what they saw mattered, that their instincts were worth following, that someone in the room was paying attention. that they were not invisible. There are people moving quietly through spaces you pass through every day. The man who restocks the supply room before your shift begins. The woman who wipes down the workstation after you have gone home. The person who checks you in at 6 a.m. and says thank you when you have not thanked them. Some of them are carrying things you cannot see, losses you would not believe, knowledge you would be astonished they possess. Lives that were once full and extraordinary and were taken apart piece by systems that punish the people who refuse to look away from what is wrong. Mansa Adepa mopped floors in a Toronto hospital for 9 years. She was one of the most skilled cardiologists on the continent. She saved a man's life with 5 words on a torn corner of paper in 38 seconds at 2:51 in the morning on a Tuesday without anyone watching. The only reason she had to do it quietly, from the margins in borrowed handwriting on recycled paper, was that no one had ever thought to ask who she was. Don't walk past people. You never know who they are, and you never know what they have been carrying in silence all this time, waiting for someone to simply stop and see them. If this story stayed with you, we would love to have you with us. Subscribe to Ancient African Folktales and turn on notifications so you don't miss what comes next. Every story we tell carries something worth keeping. The next one might be exactly what you needed today.